Welcome to the J3U University podcast. I'm your host, John Jewett.
And I'm your co-host, Luke Miller.
Our mission is to elevate the physique coaching standard
and deliver the highest level of competitors to the stage.
Let's jump into today's episode. Building an Olympia level physique. Welcome everybody. I am back from the 2024 Olympia, and Luke and I wanted to do something a little special for everyone, is actually go through this past Olympia showing for myself and just do a needs analysis, exactly what you should be doing when you're coming off stage, and breaking down just kind of pose by pose and looking at weak body parts, strong body parts, maybe flaws in posing. And through this, we can start laying out what's going to initially then become our training program for the next off season, how we improve to try to move up and progress our Olympia level physique. But don't worry, you don't have to be an Olympian. This still applies whether you're doing your first show or your pro qualifier or all the way up into the Olympia. Luke, how you doing, man?
I'm good. This is fun, right? Because you saw a lot of the work that you did last year pay off with massive improvements in the physique that kind of like elevated you into that open class and making it to the Olympia and kind of where you placed at the Olympia. So, success leaves clues. So we are already operating with a lot of evidence of what did work in the past. And the cool thing about needs analysis at this level that I do find is that it's more of a kind of like an investigative, like what worked and what do we keep in versus what actually needs to come into the plan in order to close the gap, because you did a lot right this past off season. So I hate to say if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but we're still needing to go through this needs analysis to say, hey, is the areas of focus in program design going to close the gaps that are now present at this level? Because that reevaluation, that assessment is something that gets narrowed and narrowed and narrowed the higher end level that you compete. And so like those holes that you try to fix become a smaller margin for error. And so we need to be really specific with this breakdown. And so I'm really excited for this because we're already operating with a lot of evidence of what success looked like in this past year. We can talk about that, but we can also look at, okay, what does moving up into the top 10 look like? And what does that look like for John? And yeah, this is my favorite part of the coaching process. You can see I'm like giddy with excitement. When John and I said we're going to do this, it's like, I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. I love this part of coaching.
Yeah, I think you also brought up a good point, because we'll have a lot of people that come and they'll ask like, hey, does this split look good? I want to bring up arms or chest or whatever it may be. And for one, you have to be accurate and say, like, do you really need to bring up arms or not? Where's your big ticket items for the fast track to improving your physique on stage? But also look at your current split and what is that actually doing? Like, you need to make decisions based on your data. Which, if you're just like, for that question of like, hey, does this split look good for bring up my chest? It's like, well, what have you been doing on your current plan? And what has that been doing for your chest? And a lot of times, maybe it's not a complete redesign of the program. Maybe it's just simply moving some exercises around, or even the exercise choices. Sometimes we see like prioritization in the session is just not even towards the body part that wants to be targeted. A lot of people are wanting to go to, let me train something more frequently. When the first step should be like, are you getting the full stimulus on your first set of the first session of the week? Then from there, we might, then build out, let's make sure you're adequate stimulus in that session. And then from there, when are you able to train that muscle group again? So great point from Luke is that to know where you need to go, you should need to know where you started at and where you're coming from. And so we have my past programming of what I've been doing. We now have looking at these stage picks, my past picks, to say like, all right, this is the stuff that works and this is the stuff that needs to change. And when you will find is once you get to this level that usually the split you kind of fall into and the volume categories that are applied within that split won't be far off from what needs to keep occurring. Like, it's not all of a sudden that my chest is going to be this amazing strong point and my legs just completely drop off or something, right? To where I need to redesign it all. So you'll find that your specialized split will eventually kind of be your split you kind of live on. And then there just needs to be like kind of minor shifts within that for focus. But I think we can just go ahead and we'll jump, and Luke and I will start just looking through these past stage picks. What I have pulled up here is the second call out in prejudging. I wanted to show this one as it's just a little bit fewer guys, and it's probably easier from a viewer standpoint to actually see it. So we'll just go shot by shot and exactly how Luke and I would break these shots down, and then kind of build out our needs analysis. So you as a viewer, and hopefully you're on YouTube watching this and not just the audio, but we'll do our best to give the audio illustrations here, and to help visualize it for yourself. But anyway, we'll just start here with the front relax, which the first time you walk out, this is what is going to be the first pose that the judges will see. So now, once you're past this first shot, though, in bodybuilding, it's all mandatories. So it's not a lot of time you're going to even spin in a quarter turn, but this is one you're going to be living in for a lot of times. Like when we go up there and they're starting to move guys around, they haven't even done the other shots yet. So they have an idea of where they want to see, but this shot's a primary one to make sure you're able to hit properly and show your best attributes. So the front relaxed. Do you want to start on this one, Luke?
Yeah, I'll start with what jumps out, because I think this is a great posing piece of like something that you wrestled with a bit in Vancouver, that we talked about pretty in depth when we were there, and kind of what does a front relax pull down highlight for you. And I think one of your big strong points from an aesthetics point is how small that waist gets when you pull it down. And I think for you, this ties this physique in so well. To kind of second the waist being pulled down as like a part of that like strong point. I think the small bit of quad volume you added drastically made the quad sweep a much better visual on stage. Just when I watched you walk on stage versus, Vancouver, obviously you were quite a few pounds heavier, so quite a bit fuller. But it was very clear that like that even small integration of that second day and small bump in volume made a pretty drastic difference in the quad presentation on stage. It's already a strong body part for you with kind of where the adductors are, but the quad sweep side of the equation, I think did take a step up. And I think like those are two strong points to really point out of like, this is where you beat a lot of guys. And the evidence that you pulled from the previous program design is that a very small dose and volume increase made a drastic difference in a very short amount of time, which means your volume ranges are really tight. And so like you said earlier, probably not a lot of movement going to happen in the leg department from a range perspective, unless you have to build more room for other body parts. But I like to start out with what's strong, just because it's what catches your eye first. And then we can, start to bring it in. I'm gonna pull you in for kind of what you see on the weakness parts of the front relax. But to me, those are two things that like you always need to keep intact, because it's what separates you from the pack a lot of times.
Yeah, and just for everyone like listening for context, like most of my off season last year was spent doing a push-pull off, push-pull legs off split. So I would train 5 days out of the 7 days. From Vancouver to Olympia, I moved to a 6-day split. So I was doing push-pull legs. So that normal Tuesday off day, I actually just went to the gym and just trained primarily just like 4 sets of quads. So it's not an overly taxing day. But however, there was a decent jump up in volume from when in the off season, I was doing like 7 sets of quads. So this now moved me up to I did 6 sets of quads on my main leg day, but this other 4 sets was the addition. So, looking at just like maybe a 3-set addition of quad work to actually try to improve them and move the mark here, which that volume mark is something to kind of check off of, because I felt like in the last off season, my quads probably didn't improve as much nearly as like upper body did. And so I was probably a little closer to more of a maintenance volume in that aspect to a degree. So it just kind of a thing that I would look at, say, okay, to really improve in the off season, I probably need to be closer to this like 10, 11 sets for quad work. I agree with you here. We've debated, like Luke talked about the pulled down front relax and just referring to like crunching down on the abs versus doing more of like a vacuum almost and pulling up, which There's trade-offs here because I do lose a lot of width not pulling up. As I'm not a very like wide clavicled individual. Like I'm just smaller in structure. When you see like John De La Rosa or definitely Brandon, like my hips are smaller, my clavicles are narrower. So that is a limitation. Like if I pulled up high, I would gain more width. However, it also winds up my waist doing that way. So it's trade-offs here. And another thing to consider too is like to hold a vacuum front relax for how long they hold you in it. You could get gassed out pretty quickly. So this is a good balance of like me being able to also run the rigors of posing on stage for a long time. But also I think what jumps out at someone when you look at them on stage is midsection. Like you kind of are drawn to the center of an individual. So being able to actually, if you have good abs, like flex and contract those abs, really stands out, because when you look at my physique, comparatively to John's, right? John pulls up, he really showcasing a lot of his width in the shot. However, it stretches out your abs, so you don't show as much detail. So it's like trade-offs there, which when you look at my physique, it does bring a lot more detail to the front relax, like you see with Bonnick and Brandon, right? They're both kind of crunching down on the abs. Limitations within my like front relaxed is still like just overall size, really. I don't feel like there's a glaring weakness in the shot per se. I think being that I am crunched down more, it shows like kind of this longer chest. However, it's just not the width I can't do anything about. But I do think it shows like good delt development and arm development. So I think it makes it a pretty strong shot. I think to really improve that shot, it just comes down to just more overall. I don't think there is a glaring weakness, at least when looking at this one. Maybe you argue more lat to fill in a little bit, but that could be even just the shadowing and stuff on stage. I don't know. Luke, do you see like some glaring defect outside of this overall?
No, just an overall size perspective. I think a little bit of chest density would go a long ways. I think one of the things I second with the pull down is I do think it makes you look a little bit denser across the top line, which helps, right? Because we know that like, chest development has been a pretty big focus in previous blocks. And I think it helps you kind of, I don't want to say hide it, but it makes it not as stretched out as pulling up and kind of getting into that full flare. I think the lat development improvement would just kind of exaggerate that waist piece. But where I would then shift or pivot here is like, okay, if there's nothing that stands out as a glaring weakness, we probably need to look at other shots to confirm these thoughts. Like This is where I start to go of like, okay, this is the initial thought. I don't see anything glaring here, but this doesn't mean it's not apparent in other shots, or I need to confirm these thoughts in other shots. So I think this is where we would then shift into, okay, what are some of these other shots that are going to show these body parts that we have some questions about? Like, are we going to look at lats in the back double and the front double and the rear lat spread and chest and the side chest? And so like, that's where you would start to then kind of pull up these other shots, and let's start to kind of go through what's correct and what's wrong from that front relax, and then start to build some trends.
Yeah, I think, and that's a cool highlight too, because like, all right, you've posed a shot to hide weak points, because those weak points are there and they're going to get exposed like as we move into these next shots, which you typically always after your front relaxed, you're going to hit a front double bicep. That's like kind of standard for what goes across. So, yeah, we can move into this front double bicep, which I think that's where you start to see a little bit more discrepancy in like my clavicle width. Just like if you were glance out, like just silhouette look, I think some of the leg aspect you start to see, like how John poses his legs versus mine, shows a bit more X frame. Like Bonnick has, like honestly, between Bonnick and Brandon, our leg size isn't that different. However, the shape, like for Bonnick, he just has a lot of roundness and sweep to his quads. So we have just like, hey, there's just some structural shape of the quads that are going to be limitations. We've talked about like, can you bias the quad sweep? And you could to a degree, but relatively the shape of your muscle won't drastically change here. But I think just standing next to larger individuals, you're going to see just that where it needs to build out more. And actually, we should have pulled up maybe the one with me next to Hunter, because you can see like, hey, a guy in a very top, and maybe we'll jump both of those at the end. But how does the bigger guys that are in that first call out, what does that look like? But anyway, so I would, I still say here is that, hey, more quads is going to keep building out this X frame. I think still a strong point for this pose is hitting the vacuum in this shot, because it still showcases like ab development. However, it does like cinch the waist in, and I think it stands out comparatively well. Where you get, I think this discrepancy here is like, hey, you can't change like clavicle width, but you just get wider, right? I think still a little lat, but I think this is where my chest is really exposed because you stretch it out fully, and we can see like, especially Brandon has a great chest, and you could see the roundness in his chest. Bonnick to a little lesser degree, but still more than me. Same with John. Like John has a little bit more chest than me. So that I would say is the weakest part of this pose for me, from a body point standpoint. I think arms are relatively on par. I have good biceps. But I think again, from there, I would just want to see the other shots. But, if I was to highlight here, I'd say, hey, main point to address would be chest, probably some lat secondary to just get more width out of the shot. Then lastly, just keep building out the leg size.
Yep. Big highlight or red writing on the chest development. And then I'd probably put a mark next to the lat development just to like confirm it in some of these other shots as we go through, just because it's the second time we've brought it up. And then kind of move into that next front lat spread if you've got it. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and I'll let you. You can take this shot, Luke.
Yeah, this is from a height perspective, this is a tough one, right? Because you talked about clavicle width and silhouette and frame, and for you to beat guys in this shot, like you have to have no gaps. Like you can't have any gaps in the arms. This has to be hit really well. And really kind of making sure, excuse me, the midsection control in this shot is kind of relative to the standard of what you hit this shot. And when I see this, like the first thing that my eye draws to of like, where do we need more is that, again, that chest density through that front shot. It looks better here comparatively because you are able to kind of like contract it in that front lat spread. But to kind of match from a width perspective, a little bit more lat. And then again, the quad sweep, just like you kind of pan over to like a Bonac, right? And you kind of see like the stance there versus yours. Like those are the two things that really jump out for me when I see this shot.
Yeah, I would, even with like, I think about Phil Heath, and like, he's not a wide clavicle guy, but to really like bring up his width shots in some of these was like his arms were huge. Right. Yeah. And so when you look at, say, John, like John catches my eye because it just looks so full. But it's the arm size that draws me, even with like Brandon and Bonnick, like, and look, what is the widest part? Like it actually is the tricep. Mm-hmm. So I think even more tricep in the shot would just help a little bit, but it's like, it's a small ticket item for taking up space on stage. It's like, what do you really need to really like be blowout? And probably it still would be more quads and quad sweep specifically to do so. And so like minor stands out there. I would say this isn't one of my best poses. And so it's the one to really look at to see how can you improve that. But I think, yeah, more quads. And one thing that I keep going back and forth between is like kicking one of the legs out. And I did that in finals. I think it does look a lot better to bring some of that in. But yeah, I think those are still like some of the points that we see to address within the lat spread. I think then we'll go to the next page and be able to see.
Yeah, and just a comment, like on the quad sweep portion, like the kick out is a way to kind of add a little bit there without like the more development piece. And so it's something you would want to compare through the off season as you saw development start to come up. Now I love this shot. I'm gonna let you start here, but this is a shot for me that highlights a lot for you.
It's a good shot for me. However, I think it's the most exposing from a size standpoint.
Yeah,
next to the other guys.
Yeah,
you know,
like
like
I was gonna say,
it's good, but when you see, like, I think when you have a guy that's really muscular, like I think about Hunter, or Nick Walker, like their strongest poses are like side chest, side try. Because it usually, like, for guys, like if your waist isn't awesome, you can hide that. If your muscularity is awesome, it just further highlights that in this shot. So when you have a guy that is bigger, like, yeah, you absolutely could get engulfed by this shot, which my side chest is actually a good shot for me. But next to the guys that are more muscular, I'm just really exposed. And just like from the ground up, we see like all of their legs look bigger than mine as just taking up space. Really, you could use more quad and more ham drop in the shot. I think once we get up top, we can see the chest, delt, and just even arm is exposed, which you're like, well, damn, John, you just said every body part. it's like, yeah, I guess it's just overall, right? Really just more development overall in the shot, to hang with guys that are just bringing more size. So,
yeah, I think it's something that, especially with like when you would go up into like the first call out of guys, you would see it even more, I think, is kind of where it would really stand out. Kind of like you're pointing out Hunter and Nick. That's why I said it shows a lot for you. And like, just like the size, like first year in open, like you beat a lot of guys with how aesthetic your physique looks, but there's still like a size gap to close when we look at like total tissue on stage.
Yeah. I think the guys that are probably around my height, structurally similar, probably closer to like the 240 range. Like I'm like 233 ish. And I know some people look at weight, some weight on individuals goes a lot farther. Like I was talking with, Fitzwater, and he's like 235 ish, but he has like no waist. So all that weight goes to his other muscle groups. So, and he's just, has different structures. So, it's same like think of a Keon. Keon is probably, I don't know, 205, 207 or something, but you could say he's like looks 220 or 230. Right. So, but when you look at a John De La Rosa or Bonnick, like we're relatively pretty similar in height, but these guys are closer to that 240 range. So yeah, it's just a size thing that needs to happen.
Yep.
So that pose, would you say like just overall development there? I don't think I would still like go back to say chest just because we see that in those front shots. But let's move to the back shot, which I think this is where I make up the most ground and am least exposed.
Yes, I agree. I think this is where you beat most people. I think it's a good thing that you are where you are in the lineup too, because you really expose John and Bonac here in this shot. I think it makes you look very dominant on stage. If like you and Brandon were in the middle, like just in this picture in particular, like you guys would stand out like even more, but Brandon's back double is just so deadly from a back development standpoint. But top to bottom, it's definitely one of your stronger shots. Like getting you in the mix obviously is those first few, but this is where you're beating most guys, which is interesting, right? Because when we highlighted lat development in front relaxed, right, and even a little bit in the front lat spread, it's like you turn around and it's not something you're highlighting when you look at these shots.
And what would be the reason here for that, right? Because within your front double, within your rear lat spread and your rear double, you can pose to make your waist look farther away from the judges more so, and give more of a taper. So I think there's a posing advantage here. You're especially going to see it in my rear lat spread. But to where you're like, okay, there is enough like taper here. I think even we're saying delts and arms and stuff earlier, but at least across like this comparison, delts arms are very comparable, if not, beating some guys. If you looked in some of my like walkouts, like Hottie's in that lineup and Hunter, you can then really see like the size difference in arms and delts comparatively to those guys. I think moving like downward though, like my legs just take up a lot of space on stage. You can see the lack of like quad sweep out versus Bonnick has that roundness, right? So more like even Brandon, I think that's more aesthetically pleasing to a degree. Not much I can really change structurally there, but like hamstrings and glutes and everything, to my advantage, are like extremely lean. But I think overall development, the shot's a highlighted strength. So I would say you wouldn't need as much training allocated to this body part, or what you have been doing has been working. So just don't change that.
Yep. And you're going to see something similar. Pull the lat spread up, but you're going to see something very similar in the lat spread as well. Yeah.
Right. So opposing thing here is like, to be able to make my waist extremely small in this pose, there is quite a bit of lumbar extension that does occur, and like not quite like anterior hip tilt, but more so just moving at the lumbar aspect to push that waist away from the judges, and then have the back further back behind it to really showcase lats and the full back piece. So shots just very filled in. Really gives like, it's like a perfect X if you like draw your X through, right? Like even leg placement, everything makes the shot really, really stand out. It's actually probably one of my strongest shots, which is shockingly so, because that was definitely not always the case. Now I think we probably need to look at these other guys, but if you had to like really, really try to argue like, hey, maybe like just trap development, as mine look a bit flat out, that could be opposing piece though. But I still think, hey, just keep letting the back development as it has been, should be adequate to take care of it.
What I would, before we move on, like real quick on the trap piece too, this would be something where I would refer back to the last shots from the previous year of competing into this year of competing, to see what has the development in mid-trap been from those shots to these shots, and is it a time piece for you? Because it's something that within back training you've put a lot of effort into, just to get a gauge of, is the volume landmarks that we have in play progressive over time, where you would see this with another year of off-season be another step forward relative to these other people.
Right. Should we jump over to side try?
Side try.
Unfortunately, the side try.
Yeah. No, we both like that side try.
Hold on. John's not in this pose. Let's try to get a better one for him.
Oh, man.
Oh,
well, John doesn't want to hit the side try either.
Maybe we don't have one then. We'll just do the best we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. We'll do our best here.
Well, Bonnick's side try is phenomenal. It's one of his best shots, one of my worst shots. So, we'll compare it. It's really good for Brandon too. Mine's so what I would say here is, first off, is like, this is definitely a mobility and access piece to address in posing, and something to keep working on in the off season. My thoracic rotation is actually pretty decent, but at the same time, to get enough shoulder extension is a big problem. And so like you can see Bonnick, like how far back he can pull this shoulder, which highlights that taper, while mine covers it, which actually makes me look like a box, which is not how you want to hit your side try. Same with Brandon, like he can get that like gap between the body here. And even a ton of rotation to show like a V taper, while I'm really lacking the shot, and it's real hit or miss for me if I can get into it. But I think we still see the same exposure piece that we see in the side chest, of just probably needing just a little bit more overall. Like in the quad, it's almost not as much, but I would still say like more is going to be better here, especially across like chest, delt, arm. So again, I don't think there's like the glaring standout, but just more needs to happen.
It's a muscularity thing. I think there's something to look at for how you get into side tricep, just like spine mechanics and stuff. But Yeah, I'd leave that there before we go down a rabbit hole. Ab and thigh.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to today's podcast. Are you struggling to hit your peak on show day? Feeling lost in the off season? Upgrade your coaching game with J3U University. Our program covers everything from off season to contest prep to peak week, all based from real client results. Along with our comprehensive physique curriculum, you'll also get access to our 4 rooms with our J3U team to answer any questions you have and live Q&A sessions to further your coaching and athlete experience. We are the source of education for top IFBB pros and coaches. Join us to elevate the coaching standard at J3U University. Let's get back to today's podcast.
So I wanted to ask you about this. You hit it straight on.
Yeah.
You did both, but you hit it straight on. I was wanted to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, there's a lot of critique around should you hit your ab and thigh straight on, because is it still an ab and thigh if you don't hit it straight on?
Yeah, I figured that might be where you're coming from.
And like, so, okay, strong points to hitting it straight on is that I do have a small waist and I have decent legs. So it could really highlight a lot versus me turning to the side and hitting it. Like Bonnick hits it from the side. It does look really good. So it's like a debatable one. Like I transitioned into it. So I did both.
And I saw you did both.
And so I'm still torn here because I would like to hear feedback from Tyler of like, hey, should we hit it like from a side angle and stay there, or do you not even want it? Because he did bring up in the side tricep pose that we absolutely want this hit like a traditional side tri. Like, do not twist to the front because you're turning that to like an ab thigh shot. So I do want that feedback to see what he has to say about it. However, I think it's still good. We can just look at this pose and break it down more. I would say like I just didn't get my quads flexed a lot in the shot. Could be a fatigue of just moving into the pose. It could be just how I position myself with my torso and hips. But either way, strong points. Hey, ab development looks decent. I think more is better though still for me, especially when you look at like a Hottie or hey, like Nick Walker has amazing abs. To like this shot is good. However, sometimes I have a harder time like hitting my ab shot, and if I'm not flexing as hard as possible, they will be kind of look like washed out. So I think just more development there would be a good piece. Also, it's very exposing, like from a lat width standpoint, to be in that shot. So I think we have our front lat spread and this shot that could just say, hey, a little bit more lat should keep happening there.
Yeah, I agree. I was gonna bring up the lat first, and then secondary, just like continuing to add to the quad sweep, so that either way, I just like, and I know this is partially how Bonac hit it, but man, you can see how thick and dense his quad development is on that like front stance shot, right? And I know he's doing it to hide his waist, but like that's kind of the big piece for you here is like getting the hip position where you can control abdomen, but still like get full detail through the quads to show the full sweep.
Right.
That I'd almost like, this would be something I'd see this and then I'd go to a second picture, a third picture to see like, to confirm the assessment of the shot. This is like how I would look at this in my head.
All right, we can move on to the final pose.
Most muscular, everyone's favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of my other good shots, I can highlight like the waist size, the ab development. Hands on hip has a good advantage if you can do it right, because it can take up a lot of space on stage. Like for a shorter guy to hit a crab pose, it does like condense you down a lot.
Structurally.
So for some guys, it's the way to go. Other guys, you should never hit your crab pose. One thing I saw Tyler when he was doing his critiques of one of the shows was with the New York Pro with Nick and Martin. And Martin was hitting his crab, and it like pulled Nick into hitting his crab shot, which was very exposing actually for Nick. And Tyler was like, don't ever hit your weakest, most muscular, just stay in your shot. that's best for you. So that always stuck in my mind of what he said. So like my hands on hip, you see other guys maybe hitting all three most musculars, but just only hit the ones you're really, really proficient at, and that highlights your physique. So for a hip and ab on thigh, that absolutely is mine. It actually, like, if you look here in this shot, like Brandon's a really wide guy. I would say I match his width in this shot, but I actually now stand out with width hitting it in this shot.
I agree.
Now, if you had to like try to really critique it, I would say it's just kind of more overall, really. I think my arms stand out here in delts that could use more. But then when you go to the chest, you're like, yeah, probably chest, but at least it doesn't stand out as much as a weak point relative to everyone else.
Yeah, with everybody kind of flexed down on it, it does make it a little bit less of a gap chest-wise, but I would like to see more top line just overall, because I think where you win this shot is you now make yourself, like you said, you make yourself wide here with hands on hip, right? Which is something you don't get structurally just because of like your structure, like we've mentioned. Like it's not something you get to have every shot. When you have it, you need to take the advantage of it, and that's where like everything across that top line, like development wise, more of it just makes it stand out even more to me.
Yeah.
I see. Cause like I see you like another 6 pounds here and you just wipe the floor with this call out in this shot.
Yeah. And I mean, this would be the last shot in this call out. I think it'd be interesting. We can jump over to the finals because I'm next to Raphael and, Akeem.
Yeah.
And those are massive individuals. So we can try to find this one. It's like 1,000,001 pictures to go through. Oh, yeah, no, we found it. Here we go.
That was quick.
I think it's one back and we'll be in our front, probably right at our front double potentially. And this is what I was talking about, Luke. It's like a lot of guys on stage at once. So this should be, what should this be? 6th or 7th through 12th place, I believe.
Yep.
7th through 12th place. So, which we have like Akeem and Raphael, which, I mean, Raphael's just a tall, like big structured guy. We already saw the comparisons between them, but now we have some bigger guys to look at, which Akeem is a wild physique. I mean, he's got a small waist. He's broad. He's a ton of muscle. When he's in shape, like, damn, he's hard to beat. And he actually, that's where he beat me in finals, was he's moved up drastically from prejudge. But yeah, we can see like maybe confirm some comparisons here. And it's really far away. I realize that if you're watching, but I think the leg discrepancy is like not as big of a deal with, at least with amongst these guys, but it's the, especially with Akeem, the chest size is what really stands out for me, at least in that shot.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's see.
And so like, as you're kind of hearing us back and forth on, this is like the note-taking piece where we're writing down each kind of point for these shots, highlighting. You've heard us mention like highlighting or putting in red, like when we see things that are recurringly happen. And then you would kind of go back through and start to add up how many times this happens across all these shots, and then kind of start to then look at the program design piece. But I think this is a good comparison to look at, because like this is where you see like just Akeem and Brandau in that front lat spread, just like so structurally big.
And it's just like
it's a gap you have to close with tissue.
It's you can't do much around like structural width. However, just a development piece, like, hey, tricep, delt, chest would give a lot to the shot. This is the one where I actually kicked my leg out, but you can see like if you looked across everyone, it does stand out of just like taking up more space and giving more of that X frame. So I think I should always remember to hit the shot like that. We'll go to let's see, a side chest, which for Akeem, I know it's hard to see Akeem. He's part of in the dark background here, but his side chest is his wildest shot. Like we mentioned, the most muscular guys is where they're going to really stand out here. but it's just so much size in his quads and in detail as well. Raphael, side chest is really good too. His critique is he could still use more size just because of his structure so big. So I think just still, like, for me in that shot, it's more overall. We've already gone through a lot of the breakdowns, but we can just kind of move through and confirm things here. I think even here, like, hey, with Raphael's, gosh, look at his width taking up space compared to all those short guys. Like, a taller guy that's filled out is nearly always going to have an advantage. So, but I think this shot's confirmed to still be a stronger one.
Yeah, and I think it's like when we look at these trend lines, it's so funny, and I love this talk because there's been a fair amount of shots we've talked about general size.
Yeah.
Right?
I actually hit the side try better here.
You did.
A little.
You did it better. Look at your turn. You actually turned that back shoulder to the judge.
So it shows you just to prove. And then Akeem actually doesn't turn as much. So it's actually a limiter for him. However, he might be able to more showcase more of that arm in that. But either way, he's so damn big, it doesn't matter, I think. But no. But yeah, I think that confirms a lot of the shots within that. So I think that's now looking at like program design. So a few things that we mentioned out, a lot of it was just, hey, overall size. And so with a little bit of focus on chest, and in some of those shots we mentioned some lat. I think overall we have more mentions of the like tricep, delt, chest in a few shots, less mentions of like back, hamstring development, and then quads. So it's like looking at the past off season, like where did that look like development wise? And I think all those muscle groups have really come up well. And the thing that did change though was hitting the leg volume higher. So I think moving this off season, it's like, I don't think I can train 6 days a week. I don't know if I can sustain that.
I was going to say with performance taking jumps up, that'd be hard to sustain.
But then it's also tough
to figure out
with doing just push, pull off, push, pull legs, because legs is like smashing at that volume level.
Yeah. And then like the quality of the last 2 to 3 sets of it is dropped pretty significantly, right? Where it's almost like, and I know you like the set structure week, but is it almost like you have to expand into some sort of rotary setup to kind of get that volume per session in, right?
Yeah. No, that's what I was talking to Renee about this, because we love our set days and like we train together on Fridays, but for what I do, I absolutely will do whatever is required. So if push, pull legs was working really well, and you're going to need the higher recovery aspect in the off season, just getting stronger, even though like recovery tools increase, it's like you still like need the extra rest time. So where I would see that going is like just push, pull legs off as a potential start. Just have the extra rest day. It spreads the split out a bit more. Everything is hit every 4 days. That could be potentially doable. If not, push, pull off legs off. But man, that's really adding a lot more, spreading out my volume a lot more than what it has been.
Yeah.
So, because past off season, push and pull are hit pretty much every 3 to 4 days. So I think that kind of goes along the lines of where those muscle groups have good recovery with the current volume setup. So if I went to push, pull legs off, repeat, that gives everything every 4 days to train. It still allows me to hit legs twice a week. I think that might be a good route to go.
I would agree. And I think as you progress into all season, you could look at titrating very, very small additions of top line work. So whether that be chest or delts, probably delts more than anything, into some of the secondary sessions where you would be like push, pull, 3 sets delt and legs off, and then do push again. If you're getting to a point where you had to push those landmarks up a bit as you progress into the off season.
Yeah, I think that you're like for me, a leg day twice a week is not extensive in volume. So that's like a day where you could have your add-ons on the front end of some weak parts that you just need. Like I have been doing my side delt work on that midweek leg day, just because it's a shorter session. So, yeah, that's a potential way to program it. I think the back sessions are like right on par for what they need to be. So that I don't need to change structure there. Push is, just the main thing with push is that I make sure I'm very intentional with execution, as if I get moving load up too much, I just shift it off, man, to like other muscle groups, and I just don't even get a lot of chest work out of it. So it's just being very mindful in the sessions. But I think that setup would probably work well. What I hadn't been doing is that second leg session I had in, it was just purely quad work. And I think I do probably need to keep like some hamstring work on that day. Just like
3 sets.
Yeah, like 3 sets or something, just because when I see that side chest, like more hamstring drop would only help, right? And I don't think that would be overly taxing to have at least some of that work either. So, yeah, I think when Luke and I are talking about, moving through different phases and trying to arrange volume, you do have to be considerate of the different phases and what should be a potential recovery around that. Because moving in your post-show phase like I am now, you're really excited about training, and I'm ready to just go smash it back down like 6 days a week. But remember, like, what this phase should be is also allowing recovery happen so I can sustain an off season afterwards. An easy shift in that is whatever you've been doing on prep. A lot of people might be able to continue that if volume was really pulled down a lot based on fatigue. Like my volume wasn't because I was already stage lean and I had higher food. So once this food's going back up even higher and I'm getting stronger, like 6 days a week is not going to be sustainable, and I need more recovery. So my initial shift would just be, hey, add in the rest day. It spreads out volume, and that could be something that I could sustain now. And then as we get deeper in off season, we might just be looking at some set additions to keep moving the needle up on stimulus. But for that other person that maybe they did require or they could just maintain that same split design, that might be enough, and then shifting volume back up to what it would be without the need to add in the additional rest day.
What I would do with your sessions, I do this with not everyone, but with some people that are in your situation, is I would write the sessions with the small additions we talked about, but I would put the additions in maybe red, so that week 1, week 2, they kind of follow the same type of sessions with that extra rest day spread out a bit more. But then we know what's going to be coming in pretty quickly because we know that needs to match the development. So like the things that I would go through my head would be like, if you felt like a week or 2 without that extra hamstring work on the second leg day, you would have that there in red so that's coming. Same with some of the like push work. If you felt like that was going to be progressed up at some point, like I'd be pre-planning that based on the hope that recovery is where I can just like pull that in.
No, I think those are great takeaways, at least to start up on a plan. And I think we'll wrap it up here for everybody. I know this one went a bit longer, but hopefully it was insightful for how you should be breaking down your stage shots, kind of looking pose by pose. And it might be tough if you're in the lower beginning starts of your season and you're getting on an amateur stage, and maybe you don't have, maybe it wasn't the strongest lineup. Maybe you blew these guys out of the water or something, right? You're like, what do I do now? Well, you could take your stage shots and pull them up next to the stage shots from the previous nationals and compare how you would fare in that lineup. Or whatever level you're at, look at the next level up from you. Maybe that is a popular pro show. And where do you need to build up to compare at that level? It's probably not realistic if like you took first year competitor John and looked at his Olympia Open comparisons. Like, okay, it's such a big gap. You're like, but to that point, you just would quickly realize, man, you should not have a specialized split. Just get big, right? And I think that's where I see a lot of people making errors, is that they want specialized splits when really their fast track is like, if they were to break it down this way, you're like, oh wow, I just need to get just really big before I specialize. But anyway, start your needs analysis, break down your poses pose by pose. This should be the starting framework for you being able to assess what your program's been doing, how that's working, and then making modifications to keep improving it and honing it in for your needs year after year. But anyway, any questions, leave them down below, guys. Happy to answer those for you, and we will talk to you next time.